Hello, and welcome to the Freed Black Girl Podcast. This show is a guide to self liberation, pulling the curtain back on healing through the power of storytelling. This show is dedicated to any and everyone doing the work to free their inner child, and for those with a desire and not quite knowing where to begin. My name is Najma Ahmed, and I am the host and creator of the Freed Black Girl podcast. I'll take you on my own journey to liberating the little black girl in me. Thank you for coming along on this ride to our collective freedom. Because as Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free until everybody's free. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to get started with you all. Before we get into our full episodes, I just wanted to take some time to introduce myself again. My name is Najma Ahmed, and I am the creator and host of the Freed Black Girl podcast. A little bit about myself: I am also the founder and CEO of an economic justice consulting firm called the Chisholm Group. I work with communities and cities to build pathways to the future for young people. And also, a part of that organization, I coach Black women and women of color on how to quit their jobs and start their own businesses. And that work is really rooted and centered in healing. When I started my coaching and as I work with my clients, one of the first things that I tell them is that as they're starting their own businesses, if they don't have a therapist, they need to get one, because starting your own business, like I did when I left my job back in 2021, it really is going to tap dance on all of your stuff. And so, as I've been working with my clients and as I talk to them and I share about my own journey a bit, and how I got to where I did and starting my consulting firm and growing it to be a six-figure business, I realized that simply telling people to heal was not enough, and that we need more examples that show us how do we do it. And I feel like myself in particular, I was really being called to share my own story on how I was able to really free myself and liberate myself from capitalism, but outside of work, from all of the things that were causing me not to be able to live as fully myself. And so, in this episode, like I said, I just wanted to share more about who I am and who myself is. And so, I am originally from Ohio, a Midwest girl, currently living in Washington, D.C. I am a lover of all things Black people. As you can see behind me, we have Auntie Toni Morrison, if you're watching this on camera, Uncle Jim, Uncle James Baldwin behind me. But I just always grew up loving being Black, loving who I was, loving who I am. My nickname in college was Najee X, if that gives you any context on how this podcast is going to go. Always kind of, friends have joked about how militant I am, but I've really just always known that it was special being Black. That sometimes we hear how hard it is being Black, and that's not the hard part. The hard part is living in a world that seeks to devalue us and who we are. And so, really, at the center of all that I do is for the advancement and through the love of Black people, Black women in particular. I love nature. I love music. I love animals. I love to cook, something that I've gotten from the ancestors and that has really aided me in my healing as well. And I'll talk more about that. But beyond those kind of components of what I love and my background and where I've lived, I am also a woman who spent the better part of my life, probably 25 years, disconnected from my own body, disconnected from who I was, really kind of dissociated, spent a life chasing an achievement addiction, and really feeling like if I just achieved enough, if I just kept moving forward and, getting promotions year after year. I spent a career working in education from the local level to the national level, influencing policy, really chasing this dream and climbing what I call this ladder to hell at this point. But that was my life, just achieving, moving forward, every now and then sprinkling in some friendships and relationships and dating, but nothing really felt like it was fulfilling to me for a very long time. And as I was starting this podcast and as I was thinking about how I wanted to share my story and really what got me to the point of deciding that I wanted or needed to heal, one story in particular came back into my mind. And this was back in 2018. And this was before I started therapy and my healing journey. And I was working for a few months at what I thought was my dream job. I was working next to the Capitol here in DC, working to, like I said, influence policy around education across the nation. And I had been in this job probably for about 6 months at that point. And one day, and I remember this vividly, I walked outside of my office. It was probably, I know it was dark, so it was probably like 6:30, 7 o'clock. Probably worked about a 10-hour day, as was normal for me at that point. And as I was walking down the street and getting to go on the train to go home, I started to feel tears welling up in my eyes. And I, if you know me, am not an or was not a typically outwardly emotional person. And so to be walking down the street in the middle of Washington, D.C. with tears forming in my eyes, I was like, make it stop, make it stop. What is happening right now? And I couldn't. It was like whatever was inside of me was filling up, and I was no longer able to contain it. And so tears just started streaming down my eyes. I'm talking hot tears in the middle of a sidewalk in Washington, D.C., probably like on a Tuesday evening. And this overwhelming feeling just washed over me. And I heard in my head the words, I don't want to be here anymore. And I remember immediately it scared me because I didn't know if I meant I didn't want to be here at this job or that I didn't want to be here in this world anymore. And immediately, my next thought was, I have to get some help. I have to go to therapy. And even looking back on that story now, I asked myself, what was it that made me have that be my next thought? Oftentimes, when we're feeling overwhelmed, our next thought for a lot of people is not, I need to go get some help or I need to go to therapy. Therapy wasn't something that anybody in my family had ever done, or that anybody had ever talked to me about, but that was what had come to me. And I was thinking about this, like I said, what made me come to that realization that that was what I needed. And at that time, in the world, a little show called Insecure on HBO was on the air, and it was in its second season. And I don't know if you all remember, but in the second season of Insecure, that was when Molly's character went to therapy. and she had a Black woman therapist. And looking back, that was the first time in my life that I had really seen a Black woman who was around my age, who was going through similar things in the workplace, trying to achieve, and feeling like life should be different, that I should be in a different place, that I should feel a different way, that I should be more fulfilled, that I should be happy, and that I should have some joy. And I just didn't. And I felt so empty. At that point, I felt like I had been scammed. I felt like I had done all of this work and got to my ideal position in this ideal role in my ideal city. And I did all of the work and I did everything right. And I still wasn't happy. And so seeing that reflected back to me on camera and Insecure in that show, as I look back on it, it probably saved my life. It's a television show, but understanding how powerful storytelling is, that we can see ourselves reflected back. And in the past, I had seen shows like Frasier, of course, right? But that felt like white people problems to me. It was like, no, I've been through so much. The show is cool, but this is not for me. This is not the type of therapy or something that I would want to access. So then seeing it in Insecure, it all of a sudden gave me a language. It gave me an understanding. When you even go to a therapist's office, like, what do you even say to them? What does it look like? What does it feel like? The idea, like, oh, I could get a Black woman therapist. And so while I wasn't making those exact connections in the moment, looking back and reflecting, I saw the power, as I said, of storytelling, of seeing ourselves reflected back to us in so many ways. And I know how powerful that show is for so many people, us elder millennials in particular, who are able to see ourselves and our struggles and our joys and our kind of just figuring it out. One of the things that I tell people a lot is that we are all essentially children in adult bodies trying to figure it out. And so that is really the foundation of this podcast. How can I allow my story, allow my journey to help you all see yourselves and your own healing? I have no desire to tell you all what to think. My goal is to show you all what worked for me and how I was able to get curious with myself, how I was able to ask myself, what is it that I needed? How I was able to give that to myself. And so, just a little bit more about my own background and journey. I grew up, like I said, in Ohio, born and raised Muslim, grew up living primarily with my mother until the age of 13 when she passed away. And she died from trauma, from an overdose. And for years, I never even told some of my closest friends that was how my mother passed. I carried that shame and that guilt with me, and I kind of just shoved it down. I never really processed through it. It was something that happened, going into my freshman year of high school at age 13, where, you're developing who you are and coming into my womanhood. And all of a sudden, the person that was the center of my world was no longer there. And the way that I coped with that was I'm just going to achieve. I'm going to do what I have to do to get myself out of this situation. And hopefully I'll feel better one day. And then that just carried on basically for the next 20 to 25 years until, like I said, in 2018, when I had that moment of overwhelm and I decided to start looking for therapists. And so I found what is called a somatic therapist, a Black woman. And I'll talk more about somatic healing throughout this podcast. But essentially, what somatic healing is really understanding the mind body connection, how trauma um, essentially disconnects us from our bodies. It disrupts our nervous systems. And what we are experiencing, we don't even realize we don't have control over. That we have a little bit of our consciousness that we're able to control, but the trauma is really driving our interactions, the way that we move in the world, the way that we perceive threat, the way that it shows up as anxiety in our bodies. And so this podcast really will dive into that in my learning and my understanding in 5.5 years with my therapist. But even before I found my therapist, I had to go through 2 or 3 different ones. It was really a test of will. Once you go into this therapist office and you've had to psych yourself up to even do that little part. And then you realize, like, oh, this isn't a good fit. Oh, God, I have to keep doing this. And so that was my process back, like I said, in 2018. I looked at my insurance. I looked to see who was out there, and I tried to go at it in that way. And when that was unsuccessful, I found a website called Therapy for Black Girls, which still exists, and I highly recommend that you all check it out if you are looking for a Black woman therapist in particular, or African American therapist, or a person of color. But I think they're all Black women. I'm not sure, but I went through that, and that's when I was able to find my current therapist. And that began my journey of really understanding how everything that I had gone through was impacting me in the present, and how I was basically numbing myself, how I was dissociating so that I didn't have to deal with all of those things. It felt like it was too much. And so, like I said, I had just pushed all of those things down. I freed the little Black girl in me. We hear about inner child healing, and I really was frozen in time. Luckily, I was a pretty mature 13-year-old, but in a lot of ways was severely immature. And so this podcast will allow me to share my story for those who may feel similarly. I feel like in this country, in this world right now, we are in a space that is calling us to heal. In order for us to move forward as a collective, we have to do the individual work that is required of us. We had this pandemic, and it was as awful as it was also an opportunity, I felt, for me to really have a lot of stillness, to really look at myself, to ask myself, what do I want? And at that point, I had been in therapy for a couple of years, and I'm grateful because I think things may have been quite different if I was not. But I was already doing a bit of my work, but the pandemic really caused me to go deeper and to really look and to see what were the things that I was avoiding. It was like I couldn't run from myself anymore. And I think that is what is happening, particularly in this country, particularly with Black women, Black folks, people of color, from our own internal and familial and generational traumas that we have, but then also what we are experiencing every day when we see racial injustices, when we see fears around democracy falling, but we know that this country has never been a democratic nation for Black and brown and queer folks. And so I feel like this is a real opportunity for me to offer some medicine back to the world as we are working through and figuring out what is next for us as a collective. And so, yeah, I am excited. I wanted to just do this intro because I'm about to be telling y'all all of my business, and so I think it's appropriate and good etiquette that I just tell you who I am, why I wanted to start this podcast. I don't know if you all noticed, but in the font in the logo for the Freed Black Girl, it is a nod to Schoolhouse Rock. And so, to give you an idea of the format of the podcast, it's really going to be I'll share a bit about my story as it relates to each topic. We'll have a set amount of episodes for the season, and ideally, there'll be multiple seasons. But I'll talk about my journey in the first part of the episode, and then I'll bring in experts to really dig in deeper. Like I said, I don't want to tell you all what to think. I want to take it back to the old school, like they did with Schoolhouse Rock, and to teach us in Magic School Bus, right? We're talking about inner child healing. So, those tried and true methods of helping us to learn how to critical think again, how to be curious about the world around us, how to be curious about ourselves. And so, each episode will feature experts who are doing work in the space that you can learn from and you can apply to your own life. I can't tell you what your journey should look like. I know what I've been through, and that's not necessarily your story. And so the goal of this podcast is for you to realize what works for you, what you need in order to live your most full and liberated life. And so, our first episode, which is coming on August 8th, and each episode will air on Thursdays. The first episode will be entitled Freed Mind, Self Hugs, and a Little Bit of Drugs. The second episode will be entitled The Freed Body, Sciatica, Hot Flashes, and Belly Fat. Oh my. The third episode will be entitled Freed Spirit, I Feed Dead People. And the fourth episode will be entitled Freed Love. The gay agenda is working. You can see that I am really going to be looking to provoke a lot of thought, a lot of conversation. I want this to be a community. I want you all to be able to feel like you're seen. This is not going to be a surface level conversation. I really want us to be able to go deep, to be vulnerable, and to really be honest about all the ways that we show up as our full selves, as our authentic selves, and in love. And so, over the course of the episodes, there'll be opportunities for you to submit anonymous questions that you want asked by our experts, and you will also be able to contribute in other ways in the community. I can't wait to watch what happens, how many people will hopefully be able to see themselves and to aid in their healing. And it's going to aid in my healing. So I thank you all in advance for allowing me to share, to be vulnerable, to tell my business on the internet. Apologies in advance. I'll change names to protect the identity of the innocent. But it's just going to be a really good time. I am excited to learn with you all. I'm excited to not have to have everything be perfect. I am also a Virgo. And so that is a huge part of my healing, that things are not always going to go as I in my head have them, and they don't need to be super polished. And I'm going to say a lot until I keep doing this and start to feel more comfortable, and that's okay. And so, thank you all for giving me the grace to grow and to show up into this space. And I can't wait to get started. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Freed Black Girl Podcast. Remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. Sending you much love, good energy, and peace. Until next time.